You know, my next speaker is so incredible. Everybody's incredible, but like some people have this amazing sort of mix of both legacy and independent accomplishment. And if you've been nominated for a Grammy 11 times, and you're also Pandit Ravi Shankar's daughter. So I'm told Anoushka, like Elvis, is in the building and hasn't left. She's just arrived. So we're going to be waiting for her. And as we are waiting for her, this is the moment that we have an open mic, 30 seconds. So any thoughts on what you've heard this morning so far about dreaming, achievement, ambition, not to be apologetic, what you felt about your own life listening to all these incredible men and women, a story you want to share about yourself. I'm seeing so many young people here. There were so many hands in the previous sessions that actually went up. Otherwise, I'm just going to call on anybody myself. Come on. Come on up. Right, it's okay. So tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Asha. I'm an entrepreneur. Came into the UK just over 10 years ago. Worked at NDTV. Barkha didn't know me.
There's like an NDTV alumni association, I think.
Yeah, I work for NDTV Profit, by the way.
Okay.
Now an entrepreneur, sell books. Apparently one of the best in the UK. I'm very proud of it.
What is your brand called?
It's a book subscription called A Box of Stories.
Someone said, oh, yeah!
Thank you. Yeah, being a producer, journalist, to being a bookseller. A lot of fun.
Something you've learned about life that you want to share here?
It was tough in the UK to go and raise fund because I did not sound like them or look like them. But I think confidence worked.
Confidence and self-belief. Thank you for sharing your story. Let's hear it for this young lady who climbed up on stage. So as I was saying, I can now introduce our next guest. And I was saying that it must be such a heavy cross of achievement to carry when you have legacy and your own accomplishment, the whole world sort of looking at you agog, everybody sort of, you know, following your life, its ups, its downs, 11 Grammy nominations, Pandit Ravi Shankar's daughter, but in her own right, a magnificent musician, an outspoken activist, a masterful sitarist. Can we please put our hands together for the legendary Anoushka Shankar? I want to hear a louder applause. After so long, come. So can we show Anoushka some love because she's coming through some horrid London traffic. Some horrid London traffic that gave me a few palpitations, but here she is, as promised. And wow, when I had to do your introduction, I'm like, 11 Grammy nominations. I don't know that there's anybody else about whom I know with links to India about whom I could say that. Is that like a big cross to carry in some ways? I mean, does it weigh you down, the weight of those 11 Grammy nominations?
I mean, it's hardly a bad thing, is it?
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, but type A personalities are like fretting all the time.
So to be honest, and hello everyone, first of all, it's so nice to be here.
Can we welcome her again?
And then, see, my experience of the way I came into music and my journey in the arts and in music, what I found very quickly is absolutely anything can be a cross to bear. Anything can be a pressure. Anything can be something that we use to beat ourselves up or set ourselves to an impossible standard. And it's about what I do with that in my mind and heart, you know? So if I see each one of those as a win, because I've been nominated from all the albums in the world in that category down to 5, that's already a win, whether you win or not. I'm human, so if I don't win, of course, I feel disappointment. But yeah, you're right. I'm maybe, I don't know, I haven't tallied it, but maybe I'm the only person.
I think I was thinking I couldn't find anybody else.
You know, that has that many nominations. Obviously, there are many legends who have some wins. Every time I lose, Björk is one of my musical idols, and every time I lose, I kind of go, you know, even I think it was my last loss or 2 losses ago, I said, that was the same day Bjork had her 16th nomination and didn't win.
Wow.
And I just thought, well, if Bjork hasn't won one yet, this doesn't really mean that much.
Well, you won for us, right? You have one for us. Is there something wrong in the system? Is there an inherent structural bias? Is there a kind of, I'm going to use this word carefully, but is there I want to say not racism, but a lack of understanding of certain of our part of the world?
Okay, I try not to take our entire time answering this question, but I see three aspects to this. That one, structurally, arts should not be in competition with each other.
Yeah.
So as a very system, it doesn't work. You know, we're not athletes where you're measuring to the second who's come the fastest to get the gold medal. You know, it's down to taste, it's down to feeling and emotional response and personal expression and taste. There's no way to really be subjective about who's or to be objective, I suppose, about who's winning something. So that already doesn't work.
Sure.
Outside of that, yeah, of course, the way that from the Western perspective, the music industry is broken down so that you can have, you know, 87, I'm paraphrasing, categories that take things right down to specific subsets for Western genres of music, and then you have global for everything else. Means that you've got everything from all around the world competing against each other. So again, it doesn't really make sense. So a lot of the, you know, African categories, like the African music is with the Indian music, is with music from New Guinea and South America. So you can't, again, be objective about what that means when you're comparing pieces of music. And so that's the cultural aspect. And then my final thing is gender as well. You know, it's not that women don't win Grammys, but I do see a difference in, like, level for level, what I may do and be recognized for compared to my contemporaries who may do similar things but are male. It feels quicker for men to get recognition for doing something serious or complicated or novel or pioneering, whereas with a woman, the language and what's spoken about is, oh, you know, soulful, intuitive, impulsive.
Yeah.
Like it sounds more like I just happened to fall out and just make something that maybe was a bit pretty.
But that language is so telling, right? The language is so telling because if there's a man who's emotional, you'll say he's empathetic. If there's a woman who's emotional, you might, not you, someone might say she's hysterical.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I've had that, yeah.
Have you had that?
Yeah, of course.
What is the most annoying thing you've heard said about yourself?
No, I can't pick one thing.
Far from reality, like, you know, how people in the public eye, you read about yourself. I mean, it happens to me, like, I'm like reading random things about myself. I'm like, that's so far from the truth, but I'm not going to explain myself.
Well, every human is a full person, right?
Absolutely.
With a full spectrum of life experiences, negative, positive, strengths, weaknesses. And of course, if you're ever in the public eye, that does get diminished down to a story. And so because I've been doing this since I was so young, my story's been kind of written for me from so much before I had any real ownership or consciousness over how I wanted my story told. I was just doing press from when I was 13, kind of wide-eyed answering questions, no strategy, no, you know, so my story is just kind of out there with me not really having a way to shape it anymore. So I feel like that concept of maybe being someone who's been playing music for 30 years or been, you know, whatever that may be, it still kind of has, I suppose, if anything, the only annoying thing might be 90% of the time when I do my work and then I'm sat down doing press, I'm still answering the same sort of 4 or 5 questions I was given when I was 14, 15.
Yeah, the questions haven't changed.
What was it like being Ravi Shankar's daughter?
I hope you don't walk away from this saying that.
I'm looking at so far so good.
So far so good.
You know, what was it like being Ravi Shankar's daughter? Do you feel that was an opportunity or a hindrance? Did you really want to play music or was it forced on you? There's these kind of 3, 4 hit points that like haven't changed as a woman in my 40s from when I was a teenager. And it's like, you can find that online and then we can move on and have another conversation.
But I do want to ask you one question about your father.
Yeah,
and
that's
the pictures are on that little screen there and of course streaming live. There was, in this Grammy moment, there was a time that you were actually competing with him, like you were both nominated. I mean, just imagine a father and a daughter nominated in the same category, like a forced or an enforced competition.
Well, my first experience with that was not obviously competing against each other, but my sister Nora Jones and I both received our first nominations in the first year. So, you know, to get to be at the Grammys having my first nomination, and my sister had her first 5 nominations. Her album had 8 nominations that year.
with your sis.
Was an incredible experience. So that familial experience I'd had.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, a couple nominations later, I was nominated literally against my father in the same category. And the reason I can't answer flippantly that question is because he passed away during that process. So we received the news of our nominations and his Lifetime Achievement Award just a few days before he passed away. So he passed away knowing he was being given the Lifetime Achievement Award, which I was very happy about. But do we swear on here?
Go for it.
I mean, it was such
We'll beep it.
It was a head fuck. It was a complete head fuck because my father had died, and 60 days to the day later, I was at the Grammys with this mix of emotions, knowing I was receiving his Lifetime Achievement Award with my sister. I'd kind of thought of what I wanted to say, but that moment of like when they're calling our announcements, and I've got all the adrenaline personally of might I win, you know, and then suddenly it's not my name being called, but it's my father, so I'm also happy, you know, and then I'm running up on stage to kind of lose, but thank people because I'm accepting my father's. I mean, it was crazy. It was a real emotional, crazy time.
Did you get past it at some point? Or
I'm
do you
here.
Still, I know, I don't mean literally, but you know, there are
Yeah.
these moments from our lives that my father died when the pandemic happened, and I was out there reporting the story, and I became the story I was reporting when my dad died. And till this date, that doesn't leave me. So I'm here, I'm okay, but there are parts of me that probably will never be okay.
That's it. I mean, losing a parent is one of the biggest, you know, difficult experiences that can happen to us. And in my case, it was also my guru. And so I lost my kind of greatest musical collaborator. I lost my teacher. And then, of course, we had this Grammy experience going on. There was also a whole other aspect going on for me, which I connected two major life events that weren't connected.
Right.
But 5 days after my father passed away, Nirbhaya's attack happened.
Yes.
And I was in the grief of my father passing when that world news came. And so for me, I can never think about one without the other because they both multiplied in me to this point that I was just feeling this trauma bubble and grief and anger and outrage. It was all one thing, really.
Yeah. So just for context, Nirbhaya is, of course, the gang rape that takes place in Delhi. A young 23-year-old girl who's studying to be a doctor. Her parents who've literally done everything to educate her, and she's coming home from a movie and she gets gang raped. And Anoushka, I do remember with so much going on inside of you, you chose, if I'm not wrong, because I think I did one of those conversations with you, you chose that moment to talk about your own experience with sexual abuse. And something in that gang rape of Delhi made you feel that you had to unpack that from wherever it was locked inside of you and speak about it. And again, like so many of us, and I say us, who have experienced sexual abuse as children, it is always within, or often within, the circle of trust. It is often people in the familial circle. And, you know, in Indian society, I don't think we talk about this often enough. And so when you mentioned Nirbhaya, I remember that. When you did speak about your battle with sexual abuse as a young girl, did you face pushback within the larger sort of family circles because this was someone familiar, known, trusted?
I'll just rewind a little bit. You know, in so many ways, like we touched on earlier, I had a very fortunate upbringing. I had a lot of, you know, incredible things in my life. And one of the narratives that, as a human and as a young woman out in the press, used to rankle me was this narrative that would be there that I'd just had a charmed life, that I'd had a silver spoon, that nothing bad had ever happened to me, and I'd just swanned into this industry. And, you know, sexual abuse isn't, you know, as I say, everyone has a spectrum. It's not like that was the one thing. Sure. But when you carry a big wound like that, and it's a secret, you know, it felt very disjointed from how I was seen compared to how I felt as a human. And I think perhaps my father having passed away made me feel a little freer to share my story publicly. He knew my story.
Oh, he did?
But any pain that he may have gone through with me sharing it in a wider context was no longer relevant.
Yeah.
I was in immediate grief. I was not thinking so much as feeling. But one of the things I really experienced about the gang rape in Delhi was, of course, it was my first time in my living memory that the whole world was talking about one story of sexual violence. I don't remember a prior time in my lifetime where everyone was focused on sexual violence. That was an opportunity. That was a moment. And any way that any one of us could help galvanize that moment or make that moment bigger felt important. But there was a little sub-strand of the narrative, which was that the reason, and I say this with no diminishment whatsoever, but the reason perhaps her story, as opposed to other stories, was being picked up so much was because of the strata she was from, because she was middle class, because that made it feel more shocking for people that someone from that class could maybe have it happen. That narrative really showed me how much misapprehension there is around who this can happen to and how universal it is. And so I knew that with my story, however much detail I chose or chose not to tell, but if people think of me as the person with a silver spoon or the person who's had everything, that for me to say, me too, this happens everywhere, this can happen to anyone, that felt really important.
I mean, I think you make an excellent point about privilege and class. And one of the earliest stories I reported on was on the gang rape of a Dalit woman called Bhavri Devi. And, 3 decades later, she has actually not got justice. But because of her fight, women in India now have protection against sexual harassment at the workplace because her case dragged on for years. And the Supreme Court then of India said, you know what? So this lady was actually gang raped for trying to stop the child marriage of a one-year-old boy. And among those who was accused of raping her was the father of the child. And she was enrolled in a government program to stop child marriage. So the Supreme Court held that this was her place of work and that she deserved to be protected at her place of work. And so born from this poor village woman who was still fighting for justice in her own case were these shields that now Indian women have at the workplace. And you're absolutely right that it's universal, and yet there is a class and privilege dimension to the stories that get told or the stories that get noticed. Your privilege, my privilege, everybody's privilege here, relative privilege. How do we use it to create space for others? I know you do it through your music. I know that your music is deeply experimental. It's been called genre defying. How do you, cognizant of that privilege that you have relatively, and I know you're an outspoken voice, create space for other women?
I can only speak for myself, but I try to look across the board in all areas of my life to see what I'm doing. And I think a lot of people in this room will share the experience that we are often the one against whom bias is happening. And we're also sometimes in the position where we are in the place of privilege, where maybe we've come a certain way in the UK, for example, thinking that we are part of the culture, that we're colonized, that we've had racism here against us, that we've been held back. But then maybe we look back and think, okay, but what about the community I come from in India? What has my community perpetrated amongst other people? And so to kind of hold these multitudes within us that maybe I come from a line of oppressed and oppressing at the same time is complex but important, because we have to be able to hold both of those, to have empathy, to have the learning of how do we take our pain and our healing and then think of how we move that towards others as well. So for me, because I make music and because I make art, it's not the same as having a corporation where it's just about maybe numbers, but I try my best to think in terms of who am I choosing to work with? Whenever I'm the person that's getting to make a choice of who I'm hiring or who I'm reaching out to, if there's a few men on board already from pre-existing relationships, being really active about making sure the other people are women, thinking not just in a visible sense also, so I can tell the story, but behind the scenes, who are the sound people, who are the lighting people, across the board, how are we diversifying? And it's not just in terms of gender as well, but in all ways.
Yeah. So we have time for a couple of questions. If anyone has questions, do raise your hand, and the mics, you know where the mics are. But my question to you is about living in the public eye, right? And it isn't just those cliched tropes of, okay, how, was Pandit Ravi Shankar's daughter, what was that? Was that pressure? Was it not? Was it privilege? Your entire life plays out in the public domain, including your personal life, right? There are people who will be writing about your marriage, your separation, your kids, your parenting. How do you guard against that? How do you deal with that? How do you keep yourself real? How do you surround yourself with people or forces of energy that keep you real and not the persona that others get to see?
I mean, I benefit from the misogyny that means that now, as a woman in my early 40s who's been divorced and had my kids, people don't have as much interest anymore.
Oh, really?
So I'm not written about the same way as I
and
used
does that
to
free
be.
you or does that irritate you?
I feel very free.
Free, yes.
I feel very free. But,
Yes.
but you know, it was unusual to be a classical musician.
Yes.
But because of the way I looked, the way I dressed, and
Yeah.
the mixed cultures I came from the 1990s onwards, even as a classical musician, I was kind of put more in mainstream categories. I had that kind of public eye thing of like, oh, I was out with friends and suddenly it was written about and I didn't know someone was there. That kind of stuff was happening. And that doesn't really happen so much anymore. So it's a lot more comfortable.
Yeah.
But I have to say, like, it's really important to think of the time. Like, in some ways, things are a lot better now than they used to be. Because even though I was in a more niche genre, I was still a woman in music in the 90s. And it's really important to think of what the climate was like in the 90s. So if you think of what was happening to mainstream pop stars like Britney Spears and the kind of like vitriol and judgment and standards they were upheld to, whether it's body weight or what they say, or it was the same.
Really?
It was the same.
Do you
matter what
remember?
genre.
Do you remember?
The judgment. So it didn't matter which side it was coming from. So the classical community, because I wore jeans, you know.
What would they say? What would they say?
It's just judgment. Who is she? Why is she playing, you know, wearing jeans? She's supposed to be representing our culture. She's not a proper classical musician. This is disrespectful. This is an outrage.
Yeah.
Then you've got other people going, you know, she's too boring, she's too classical, this is not something I can, you know, and then you've got someone else going, you know, put her in a miniskirt and make her sing. It doesn't matter what she sings, but so long as she sings, even badly, we can make her a pop star, you know? And then you've got like, it just from everywhere, it was just this like, here's a girl. And how do we market that girl? And what is that girl supposed to look like?
Yeah.
It didn't matter what I was as a musician. It was just this thing.
Yeah,
you know?
I hear you. Okay, we've got a couple of questions. We'll start with you. Hi.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Singh, and a British journalist, mainly working with the BBC, if I'm allowed to say that. And I have a connection with both of you. Barkha, I interviewed you for my biography of Sonia Gandhi, the first international one, and you gave me a lovely interview. Anoushka, hi again. You very beautifully did some songs for the story that I wrote about how my uncle rescued the Dalai Lama in 1959. He was the Indian political officer detailed by Nehru to do that. And we met when you were in the studio. And what you produced was a beautiful blend for our movie of my book, of that story, of all sorts of influences. Would you please tell us and tell the audience how you came to perform those lovely tracks and what informed your composing?
Thank you for that. It's nice to see you. I think, you know, with anything like that, obviously when I make my own music, it's very intuitively led by where I'm at and what I'm dreaming of and what I want to tell. When I'm helping to tell a story for something else, the integrity of the work is about what is the story that's trying to be told, you know? And so I try and bring whatever my skill set is towards that. And I think with something like film, I try and bring my strengths, which are existing within these middle spaces. You know, I was raised as a classical musician, but I've spent 20 years now working in this kind of genre-less middle space. And so I'm good at that. Like, I'm good at hearing how unexpected sounds may work well together, or how to bring someone's subconscious emotions to the fore by using a sound that they're familiar with, but not in a predictable way. Those are the kind of things I think about when I come to a work like that.
One more question. Yes.
Hi, Anoushka. My name is Samir Berry. I'm from Delhi and living in London for 15 years. It's a thank you. It's not a question, basically. Thank you. 2005, you were nominated for Grammy. And in November, I opened the newspaper, and it says Anoushka Shankar is in Grammy, and my daughter was being born. So I named my daughter Anoushka for you. So thank you very much. And I just wanted to thank you for this thing, and I still remember that big headline, and I decided.
And what does your Anoushka want to be or do?
She's right here.
Where is your? Can we have her on
Hi,
stage?
Anoushka.
Where is Anoushka Part 2? Come on up. Run down here.
So Anoushka is in Queen's Mary in London. She's doing her first year in law and politics.
Amazing.
Amazing. And if I can ask you as a dad, can I have Anoushka on stage? But can I ask Dad, what inspired you about our Anoushka here? To name your daughter after her.
It's just that when I read that headline, it made me feel very proud that an Indian name is there, and just brought tears to my eyes. And I said, I want to name my daughter Anoushka and maybe reach the heights somewhere.
Fabulous. There's a mic next on the floor there. Yeah. So hi, Anoushka and Anoushka.
Thank you for having me.
This is so lovely. I just think that's lovely that somebody was inspired
so
enough.
sweet.
Yeah, I love it. Do you like music?
I love music. I haven't listened much to you, unfortunately.
I was going to say, don't ask her about my music, please. Put her on the spot.
But I love everything that's Indian and Bharatiya, so classical music. People find it boring, but I don't find it boring because it just represents our rich history.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And as a young woman, what are your dreams?
Personally, I want to do something that helps my country, Bharat, back home.
Yeah.
So anything that could help it, either from a law front or from the UN or volunteering in that way. Just something that brings change, because I think be the change you want to see. Because if no one does it, then there's no point.
So, to you, as we end, you're a parent. What is it that you would want? And by the way, is your mum here?
No, unfortunately.
Oh, we were
she
hoping that
couldn't
we
make
get
it.
to
Yeah.
meet her because mum reminded me. As a parent, what is it that you want your children to know about this world that maybe nobody told you or nobody told us, because it was a different kind of parenting when we were growing up?
I was, from the second I was pregnant, I was really conscious that I was having boys. And I kind of panicked in a way, like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And I realized suddenly halfway through each pregnancy that it was an opportunity to raise the kind of boys and men that we want in this world, So right from when they were toddlers, I remember my 3-year-old sat on the table with me and I was like, well, what if your friend got 2 blueberries for cleaning the dishes and you got 5 blueberries? And he was like, that's not fair. And I was like, exactly, that's what feminism is for. You know what I mean? Like just every step of the way we've been talking at the appropriate levels.
Yeah.
And I've got 2 little warriors. They care about the world. They're not quite idealistic. They're aware of what's going on in the world to an
How old
appropriate
are they
level.
now?
They're 10 and 14. And my 14-year-old is a fighter. Like he does not stay quiet if he sees something wrong, And so your question about what may be different, the main difference, I think, is around, emotional congruence.
Yeah.
Because I think we were raised in more of an externally validated way. Are you doing well? How are your grades? How are you performing? How are you? Whereas I think this generation, it's a bit more like, I'd much rather they didn't play my music, but were healthy, happy, balanced humans. So we talk in those ways about no, never. You never have to hug someone that you don't want to hug, ever. You have to be respectful, but you get to say no, from the beginning, because they need to know what that means for themselves and for how they treat other people.
So as we end, what next? I hear you that as we grow older, actually you feel more and more comfortable in your own skin. It's the exact opposite of the cliche of women and growing older. What next? I know the music will continue, but is there a personal pursuit?
Always. There's, music, touch wood, will continue. And I love doing what I do and I love making music. But it's also about being in this world, right? Like you talked about, we live in this world. And for a long time now, whatever, I don't like calling it activism because I think full-time activists are people who, it's a different thing. But to bring, whatever message or whatever voice I can use.
And to lend your voice
and
to
to
the
do
issues
that
you care
for what
about.
matters. It's essential. It's urgent.
Anoushka, it is lovely to see you. I want to, before you go, have this young Anoushka and myself honor you as the Changemaker of 2025. Can we please have the award on stage? Okay, it's coming on in just a second. But in the meantime, as I present this to her, she's a legend. She's just hanging out here like some regular person. I have so much admiration and love for Anoushka Shankar. This is for you. And from the young woman who was named after you. Could we have a giant round of applause for Anoushka Shankar? Little more love, little more love.